Hello, and welcome to part 5 of our Littlefinger adventure. So if you've made it this far in the series, you're probably asking yourself, alright random internet guy, let's say I buy into what you're saying here. Where is it all going? Well, that's what we're going to speculate on right now. And to start off with, I'd like to say that it all begins in the Riverlands. Or maybe I should say it all comes back to the Riverlands. What do I mean? Well, think of how much of the story starts and takes place in the Riverlands. There's the tournament at Harrenhal, there's the betrothal at Riverrun, there's the kidnapping of Lyanna Stark in the Riverlands, there's the battle at Stony Sept, more commonly known as the Battle of the Bells, there's Nymeria and Arya's fight with Joffrey and the eventual driving away of Nymeria into the forests, there's the attack on Beric Dondarrion's force sent to kill Gregor Clegane, and then of course, there is the War of the Five Kings itself. So what does this mean for Littlefinger? Well, Littlefinger is intimately tied to a series of plots. He's tied to Sansa, he's tied to Jeyne Poole, he's tied to Catelyn, and he's also tied to Arya. Wait, hold up, Brandon. That guy, what kind of rank insane nonsense is this? He's tied to Arya? Well, yeah, obviously he's tied to Arya. Who was responsible for Ned Stark's death? And who witnessed that death? And who has a death list because of that death? Now, before we go on too much further, I am aware that Catelyn is now Lady Stoneheart. So when I say Catelyn, I also mean Lady Stoneheart. And with that, I now intend to put forth some serious tin. I believe that, more or less, the Game of Thrones showrunners got it right.
We have found the witch! May we burn her? Who do you know she is a witch?
She said the Game of Thrones showrunners got something right!
Wait, hold up, don't hit the unsubscribe just yet, come on, I'll reel it back in, I'm not saying they got it right. I am saying that more or less a Sansa, Arya-led Stark trial of Littlefinger is likely. Alright, I realize your hands are already on the pitchforks and you got the crow cage in the background, but hang on just a minute. What do I mean by all this? Well, I think it might be useful to watch this scene from the show. A scene I actually hadn't seen until I went back to watch it to see what the showrunners did with the idea of Littlefinger. And then I think after we watch it together, we can kind of pick apart maybe what's gonna be there in the actual books and what they left out from the actual books, and then we can build on that a little bit. And then finally we can loop back around and talk about the Eyrie and the tournament and Harold Harding and all that stuff that everyone's got on their mind. Because don't worry, I've got stuff to say about Littlefinger's current situation at the Eyrie, the tournament, and Harold Harding. But first, that clip from the Bad Dragon show.
You stand accused of murder. You stand accused of treason. How do you answer these charges? Lord Baelish.
My sister asked you a question.
I'm a bit confused.
Which charges confuse you? Let's start with the simplest one. You murdered our aunt, Lysa Arryn. You pushed her through the moon door and watched her fall. Do you deny it?
I did it to protect you.
You did it to take power in the Vale. Earlier, you conspired to murder Jon Arryn. You gave Lysa tears of Lys to poison him. Do you deny it?
She imagined enemies everywhere.
You had Aunt Lysa send a letter to our parents telling them it was the Lannisters who murdered Jon Arryn, when really it was you. The conflict between the Starks and the Lannisters, it was you who started it. Do you deny it?
I know of no such letter.
You conspired with Cersei Lannister and Joffrey Baratheon to betray our father, Ned Stark. Thanks to your treachery, he was imprisoned and later executed on false charges of treason. Do you deny it?
I deny it. None of you were there to see what happened. None of you knows the truth.
You held a knife to his throat. You said, I did warn you not to trust me.
You told our mother this knife belonged to Tyrion Lannister. But that was another one of your lies. It was yours.
Lady Sansa, I have known you since you were a girl. I've protected you.
Protected me? By selling me to the Boltons. When you brought me back to Winterfell, you told me there's no justice in the world, not unless we make it. Thank you for all your many lessons, Lord Baelish. I will never forget them.
Alright, so as you can see, we actually have, all of the core elements here. We got the letter, we got the poisoning, we got the War of the Five Kings, we got the dagger, we got Sansa, we got the Boltons, and what in the book series would be Jane Poole. We got the killing of Ned, we got Arya. But what are we missing, and what did they have to add to make up for what is missing? Well, I think the most obvious thing we're missing here is Lady Stoneheart, because Lady Stoneheart wasn't part of the series. There is a nice parallel of Littlefinger getting his throat cut, the way that Catelyn Stark gets her throat cut before becoming Lady Stoneheart, so that may be a tidbit of a clue. And we're also getting Bran, which seems to fill in a couple of the holes and give us the necessary evidence to convict Littlefinger and get him executed. Now, Bran is probably not a character who will ever cross paths with Littlefinger in the book series. They are a very long way from each other, and their trajectory seems to be rather far off. The show also appears to be setting this scene in Winterfell. Now, I could be wrong, someone can correct me in the comments, I only watched this clip from the episode and have not seen the full episode. But if this is Winterfell, I believe that has much more to do with the plot and speed of the show and its own trajectory, something that is not in alignment with the book series. So I think the final element that we're missing here is the Riverlands. Alright, random internet guy, we're 6 minutes into the video, and basically all you've said is the word Riverlands and that Dave and Dan were right, which I'm pretty sure has earned you a trial of your own. Are you actually going to tell us what you think is going to happen, or are you just going to talk about the Riverlands for another 2 videos? Fair enough, fair enough. So without further ado, let me give you my basic scenarios for what I think Littlefinger trials might look like. Scenario 1. A trial at Riverrun. Now, since Littlefinger and the Tully's story starts in Riverrun, I think it would be quite fitting for his story to end in Riverrun. And here's how I could see it going down. Stoneheart and the Brotherhood Without Banners, perhaps with the help of Jaime and Brienne, manage to take control of Riverrun. They then begin conducting trials. Littlefinger, Sansa, and the Vale Force's trajectory, which is likely trending into the Riverlands, will bring them all in contact. This will all coincide with some sort of exchange in letters, Arya's return to Westeros, most likely in the Riverlands or Vale, and probable reunification with Nymeria, again in the Riverlands, and the potential transfer of Jane Poole further south. A scenario will emerge where all of the figures previously mentioned, Sansa Stark, Arya Stark, Lady Stoneheart, and Jane Poole, along with Jaime Lannister and Brienne, and any survivors of the original party sent forth by Ned Stark to attain Gregor Clegane's head, will all be present at the trial. Now, according to the wiki, Riverrun has a heart tree with a slender, sad face inside of the Godswood. And I think it would be quite fitting in a Riverrun trial for some kind of supernatural confession to take place. Perhaps Bran could probe Littlefinger's mind through the weirwood and emanate the message mentally to everyone else in the room. Perhaps he could convince Littlefinger to do a confession through the weirwood. Perhaps the power of the weirwood and the forces animating Catelyn Stark help coerce some kind of detailed confession. I also greatly like the idea that corpses may be hanging in the background from the weirwood limbs at this point. But I digress. More or less, all of our evidence, all of our forces, all of our players would come together and lead to a conviction of Littlefinger, who would then, beneath the weirwood tree, have his head stricken off with what remains of ice, Oathkeeper. And if you're wondering if some confession about Hoster Tully's murder might be slipped in here, yes, I think this would be the appropriate time for some kind of information along those lines to be revealed. And with that, let's move on to Scenario 2, a trial at Harrenhal. Now, if you watched the Interesting Nerd Club at all, you probably noticed that I was on an episode not that long ago where I pitched this weird and wacky theory along with the idea that Brienne's sword Oathkeeper may be used as a stand-in for ice during the execution of Littlefinger. And functionally, I don't think the mechanics of a trial at Harrenhal would work any different than the mechanics of a trial at Riverrun, so consider all the basic elements and players to be operating the same. Why do I think a trial at Harrenhal might be more likely? Well, Harrenhal is just more important to the story than Riverrun, even though it's not necessarily more important to Littlefinger's story. It also has been greatly speculated as to what role Harrenhal will play in Littlefinger's story. And I think as a trial location, Harrenhal fits the bill quite nicely. As you know from watching the series, I don't think Harrenhal is involved in any sort of power play by Littlefinger, because I don't buy into the Littlefinger theory. I also don't think Harrenhal is involved in any sort of prophecy, because I don't buy into the prophecy finger theory. But proponents of both these theories really like Harrenhal, and they really want Harrenhal to play some sort of core role in Littlefinger's story. And I think that George R.R. Martin is going to bring a lot back to Harrenhal, so Harrenhal may be the convergence point of many other stories, like the Jaime and Brienne story, any sort of trial they have. It's a place that Arya Stark spent time at, and it's a place where many of the very important events I brought up in the beginning of the video that define the Riverlands as such an important area took place in. So overall, I think the most likely scenario is Scenario 2, a trial at Harrenhal, although a trial at Riverrun might fit everything in Littlefinger's story a bit better. And again, like I said, I view everything as playing out more or less the same as it did in my Riverrun scenario. So now let's talk about my third scenario, a trial at the Isle of Faces. This, I think, is by far the most tin and out there scenario, and I think the least fitting in many regards. However, the Isle of Faces does feature prominently throughout the series, and it is the center of much mystery. And many theorists have put forth the idea that we may end up going to the Isle of Faces. And I'd like to note that the Isle of Faces may be a stand-in for Bran and Bran's appearance in the show, and it may be a way for Bran to kinda, sorta, more or less, maybe, appear there for the trial. Perhaps Bran could take over the face of one of the weirwoods, mutating and transforming it into his own face, if the weirwoods on the Isle of Faces have that power. Perhaps he could speak through one of the faces on the Isle of Faces. Perhaps there's some green stuff going on there, you know, green. Putting that in front of words and theories definitely makes sense, and something like that could be happening on the island. Again, I don't think it's that substantiable, and I think the Isle of Faces is more a place we're supposed to hear about but never go to. However, if I had to pick a top 3 places where I thought Littlefinger trials might occur, weirdly enough, the Isle of Faces is one of them. Albeit by far the most tin. Again, functionally speaking, I don't think the mechanics would be all that different from what I outlaid in the Riverrun trial, so I'm not going to bore you by reiterating things constantly. All the same major power pieces and players would fall into effect, the trial would be conducted on the Isle of Faces, and Littlefinger would have his head chopped off beneath a weirwood tree using Ice, now Oathkeeper. So let's start from, I don't know, we're going to call it the top. Why will there be a trial? Well, I think that trials, much in the way they've already become somewhat of a theme, are going to continue to be somewhat of a theme in the Winds of Winter. The Stoneheart trials will continue, and obviously Jaime and Brienne will have something to do with that whole affair. If what I and many other theorists are thinking is true and there will be some kind of Stoneheart trial for Jaime, in which he will be found innocent, then we have Jaime as the person who can advocate for the side of the dagger. He's not perfect testimony, but he's able to weigh in on this issue and add doubt to Littlefinger's story surrounding the dagger. We then have Brienne, who, while she isn't an integral part of the Littlefinger Stark subplot story herself, is carrying Ice. Now, Ice has been transformed into a different sword, Oathkeeper, but I still think Ice is a critical part of the story here. It is Ned's sword, and the sword that was used to chop his head off after Littlefinger's betrayal. The sword is also intimately linked to the Stark sisters, of which Brienne is wrapped up in the plot of. So, I guess you could say she is pretty integrally attached to this plot, just in a different way. And speaking of the Stark sisters, this brings us around to Jane Poole, or Fake Arya. Now, Fake Arya is not in the show, she was simply replaced with Sansa. However, in the book series, Jane Poole was given over to Littlefinger, and Littlefinger was then who brokered the deal with the Boltons. Her testimony not only throws a wrench in any Bolton claims to the north, but she is also a critical element in proving that Littlefinger was scheming. And as a trusted, perhaps at some point in her life the most trusted companion and confidant of Sansa Stark, I think she'll be an integral element to turning Sansa Stark away from Littlefinger. Okay, random internet guy, this is fun. I like where this is going. It's certainly a lot better than your Howland Reed killed Arthur Dayne with a fishing net theory. But what about Harold Harding? I mean, I've got a Harold Hard on and I want to know what's going to happen to my boy. Well, then you're definitely not going to like where I think his story is going to go. I see 2 possible outcomes for Harold Harding that will lead to Littlefinger ending up with what he claims to currently actually have, which is total control over the heirship of the Vale. No, not that kind of heirship, I mean inheritors. He claims to have total control over those who would inherit the Vale. But we know with Harold Harding running around this isn't really true, and while the Lords Declarant would certainly like to see Sweet Robin live, if he died, they would instantly turn on Littlefinger and smuggle Harold Harding away to keep him safe and simply declare him Lord Protector of the Vale. So how does Littlefinger plan to deal with this? Well, you may recall I made a series called The Murder and Mystery of Sir Hugh, where I put forward the idea that Sir Hugh may actually have been a claimant to the throne in the Vale, and that Littlefinger may actually have been knocking him off the list so as to reduce the number of claimants on the heirship to the Vale. Now, Sir Hugh was murdered, but it was covered up as a jousting accident. And, if you all remember, we're heading into a tournament in the Vale, where no doubt the young Harold Harding will be riding as a newly made knight, following in the footsteps of his potential cousin, Sir Hugh. So in Scenario 1, I see Sir Harold suffering some kind of serious injury in the lists, a fatal injury, one that leaves Sweet Robin as the only living true heir to the Vale, and the only one the Lords Declarant would likely accept in the immediate circumstances. Yes, I'm aware many other claimants exist, however they would not supersede Sweet Robin in order of inheritance. So again, in Scenario 1, I think it's likely that Sir Hugh will take a sword, mace, or probably lance to a vital area on his body, potentially one where armor was not appropriately applied, and die. Now a second, far more tin, but absolutely fascinating alternative scenario would be that the young Harold Harding and Sir Lyn Corbray end up crossing swords. How would this happen? I don't really know exactly, but I do certainly see Lyn Corbray killing somebody in the coming up book series, and potentially even turning the tables for Littlefinger at a certain point. And while it's probably more likely that Sir Lyn will end up facing off against the Mad Mouse or someone like that, I think Harold Harding ending up in some kind of extremely deep water duel scenario isn't out of the question. Now, what he did to end up in this scenario, I'm not exactly sure. However, there's plenty of honor to be at stake all over the place in the world of Ice and Fire. And Sir Lyn and many of the other extremely cocky Knights of the Vale are definitely not ones to back down from a fight. Either scenario leaves our young falcon more than likely dead. And unfortunately, it's beneath the murky and dark shadows of what potentially is to come that we have to end our video. But wait, random internet guy, I have so many questions, so many comments, so many criticisms. There's so many things you left out, like what about the Royces, and what about Sansa's shoe? Well, I decided the video was getting kind of long, and I wanted to stick primarily to my own thoughts and theories here without diving into anything else someone else has already put forth. Well, don't worry, I'm planning a Q&A to answer all questions and address as many criticisms as I can. So, if you'd like to have a question answered in that Q&A, or if you have a criticism you'd like to put forth that you'd want to see me address, then please feel free to drop it in the comments section. And if you'd like to vote on the format of the Q&A, be it a typical response Q&A, just me talking into the phone answering questions, or be it a live stream Q&A, where you can jump on stream and ask questions of me yourself while I simultaneously answer questions from the audience comment section and the comment section of this video, there will be a vote coming up on the channel. So make sure you're subscribed and all that good stuff, and you can cast your vote and help me figure out how I'm going to do this Q&A. And with that, I thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.